Hey everybody, it is 9:31 p.m. on Friday, January 29th. That is turkey time. You're listening to an American in Berlin podcast. My name is Eric, and I am an American in Antalya, Turkey. Branding. This is exciting because I have not only a guest on this show, but I have my first American guest on the show, and not just that, my first remote guest on the show. She, which we will talk about eventually, is a comedian, is the host of the MAGAA, Make America Get Along Again podcast, as well as the co-host of the Gender Fluids podcast that deals with sex, sexuality, kink, all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, so please welcome to the show, Arielle Isaac Norman.
Thank you. I'm gonna put some applause in there.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for
first a lot of things guest.
Getting de-virginized in many ways on this episode. So do you have any idea? Do you remember how we met by chance?
No.
I just sent you like a random Facebook.
You do look familiar.
No. I'm just wearing that shirt that I feel like every dude in Austin wears. I don't know if that's a thing.
True, yeah. I think I have that shirt. So
okay. No, I think I was in Austin on like a business trip, and I don't know if you have friends who did stand up for a few years and then kind of dropped out. But
sure, of course.
Anytime there's like a mic or a show nearby, I definitely get this nostalgia. And even if I don't get up, I'll seek it out. And so I think
it's
I mentioned
fun activity. Yeah. It's a great way to get to know a city, whatever stand-up scene. Yeah.
It is. And I mean, you have a natural into like being able to talk to people that way. But yeah, I think it was at a mic, and I think, is it Kenneth Percy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think that's about right. Anyway,
I don't know. I went to this show and I talked to him. I talked to you, and I think I was trying to find I think I signed up for the mic, but it was going to be like 3 hours before I could get on or something. And so instead I just went around Austin getting hammered at bars, and you guys sent me suggestions of bars to go to.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
I hope that they were good suggestions.
I can't remember, but
so probably.
Yeah. But so anyway, whatever, we like became Facebook friends, and then you caught my attention. Like, I guess it was a few months ago. Cause you would post things. Well, why don't you tell people like, what you, sorry. All right. So there's certain expectations, like coming from the States, if somebody presents a certain way, perhaps, and like I think in the comedy scene in particular, that like maybe they hold certain political beliefs or what have you. And I would see these kind of takes you'd be posting on Facebook, and I was like, I didn't see that one coming. And yeah. And then you posted an essay you had written about gender pronouns, and I was like, damn, okay. So I really just was intrigued by some of the things you had to say and wanted to chat with you about some of that stuff.
Yeah. So you haven't seen me do much stand up then. I did that mic that you went to.
I saw that mic, and like I had seen like a few things on YouTube, and like the last couple of days I've been doing my research, so to speak. But yeah,
it's pretty scattered what's on YouTube in terms of my stand up and whatnot. I haven't been as like vigilant as some people and like trying to get all the best, recordings that I could and tapes of stand up. And then you're never sure what to put out there or not. But yeah, so if you've seen, have you seen me talk about gender much in my stand or before you? Because I'm kind of, I never know kind of how people think of me. Like I know that I defy expectations politically for my haircut, but I'm like, but if you'd seen me do a few sets, it's like you probably would have seen me saying some unorthodox things about gender. But then also I think there's when you stand up versus like the essay is me being a little bit more serious, I guess. So if I'm joking around about stuff, you still might not really know much about my actual politics,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my biggest takeaway, like watching your stand up, was that you were really fucking funny, and
Oh, thanks.
well, especially because I've at this point, if I had kept doing it, it would have been like 10 years for me, and so I know people who've been doing it 10 years and longer, and considering like it seems like that you've been doing it for less time than that, like I was really
Yeah.
impressed with how sharp you are. So,
Oh, thanks.
yeah. That was my
Yeah.
takeaway more than your politics.
Yeah.
But Facebook is like a totally different medium for seeing that stuff, especially just with all the vitriol that goes back and forth between everybody.
Yeah. And I haven't even used Facebook much in the past year. It's funny because I've actually realized in the past week or two that I kind of want to use Facebook more, because of all the apps, all the mediums that we have to communicate. It's like Twitter. I don't know. I cannot get anywhere with Twitter because I'm not really 140 characters or less or whatever it is now person, very often. And then it's like sometimes I want to be funny on there. Sometimes I just have an idea I want to share. I don't know. And I go back and I look at my feed and I'm like, I wouldn't know what to do with this either. No wonder I don't really get anywhere with that. And then with Instagram, it's just fun to share, happy little things. But I don't know. I don't really want to be getting into it with people, especially because there's so much of so many queer people, so many gender fluidsy kind of people are going to be more the ones who are like paying attention to me there. And so when I have super like unorthodox, heterodox opinions about queer shit, it's like, it's probably not the ideal place for me to share that. But Facebook, it's like, so a lot of the young have abandoned it. I do have lots of like friends and followers on there. And so, and I, can get pretty good engagement on there. And so I finally realized like, I haven't been using it the past year because it's kind of become like unpopular, or I thought of it as, I don't know, people do kind of get into fights on there, but that's not really as much my experience. And so I'm like, I like older people. I like the people who are like, I think the Facebook crowd is kind of more my crowd. Like it's always kind of, it's just hard for me, I guess, to find my audience because like I am gay. And I guess I really kind of am queer in some ways, but I've always hated that word. And I don't, like I feel some antipathy, when my gut reaction, if you imagine like a queer person, I imagine the kind of queer person I roll my eyes at. And so, and so, it's like, that's not, I don't really want that audience. I never really wanted to be like a lesbian comedian with some lesbian audience, even though now actually that sounds really fun. If you could actually find enough lesbians together. But, I don't really want, like, I really like kind of normal people. I like country people. I like, moderates. I like people who are kind of I like talking to people who are just, more normal. And then it's fun to get, especially in like a small town in Alabama, it is really fun to walk up on stage and know that people are going to be like, all right, now what the fuck is this queer gonna say? Okay, let's see how this goes. This is gonna be, and I'm not trying to be. I'm like not putting some effort into being like, let me surprise people with my politics. It's just what I am. I just am a devil's advocate kind of thinker. I am really like non-binary in my political beliefs and opinions and thoughts and questions. And so it's just natural for me to be like, it's a fun thing to do, to get up there and to be like, just to start saying stuff that's going to make people think, oh, here we come with some kind of Nanette style queer sermon. And then I turn out to be quite cool. And that's just a fun little turnaround to get people on my side from that moment of them being weary to being like, oh, well, this is pretty funny. And yeah, so, but like I said, these are just natural because I just am a heterodox, unorthodox thinker. I was raised Mormon in Texas and am gay. And so, I always would go back and forth between, like at school, defending the Mormons because people were giving them too hard of a time. And I was like, yeah, there's some crazy shit going on, but at the same time, you guys don't know all the good stuff that's happening here. But then at Mormon church, I'm defending like the world. you know, and so, and that's just continued to be the case in every kind of social situation that I get into, in college or in the comedy community or anywhere. There's just, people are always taking things too far, their opinions, everyone's just so orthodox. And anytime I get any kind of, you know, around any kind of orthodoxy, I'm like, well, we're going to need to point out the things that we're wrong about over here. You're taking, you know, your sacred cows. I always, you know, want to show people where their blind spots are, the moral hypocrisies, et cetera, which is of course what stand-up comedians, I mean, what my favorite stand-up comedy, you know, does is point out the things that we're missing. And so that's just kind of, yeah, just kind of who I am. But at the same time, it's like, I don't always want to have to be funny, because, and maybe I should be, I think this might be a problem, you know, but like on Medium, I've just started doing some writing because I have a lot of thoughts and opinions and questions, especially around the gender stuff. And, you know, I want to be able to talk about those things and flesh those things out without, you know, just always focusing on laughs per second. Not that I actually think about laughs per second at all, but you know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to talk about some things because I feel like the conversation around the gender stuff, because it's mostly happening online, you're getting people from the furthest ends of thought on this just being awful to each other. And people in real life, when you know, there's a lot that the orthodoxy of the left or the kind of queer left online is one way. And then there's just a lot that's not being said. But when you talk to people in person, whether you're talking to trans people or lesbians or trans lesbians or any combination of anything, when you talk to people in person, it turns out that there's a lot of unorthodoxy within the queer community. There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I have these questions and thoughts and concerns too, but I don't dare say that stuff online. And so I'm like, there's just so much that's not being represented. There's so much conversation that's not happening that I want to help happen. I want to broaden the Overton window on what we're allowed to talk about. And I think we've had this tack in the last several years of, well, we can just bully our way into getting what a few people want the rules to be, whatever. And if we just tell people that they're bad and evil and stupid and mean and phobic, if they don't agree with whatever a few of us decide, then they've learned that they want to be on the right side of history. So that's, you know, that's how we'll win. And I'm like, no. We have to figure this stuff out as a culture. You have to win people's hearts and minds. And we have to figure out, we're not even on the same page in the queer community about what words mean, about what we should be going for, about what the laws should be. So sorry, I kind of went off on a coffee field tangent. I think that, what was the original question?
All gold. I think, like, so for myself, like, I consider myself to be super on the left, like very much a leftist. So I don't have, my problem is that those people other people who hold those beliefs, there also seems to be like a total disagreement in terms of the tactics that we're supposed to be using to address people who don't hold those beliefs, or in terms of like how to make the world a better place for everybody. And so I'm 35, and what's crazy to me is, with technology, in my opinion, like just how quickly like the gaps in generations have widened.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, I'm probably much closer to like a 55-year-old in terms of that width than I am to a 25-year-old, and that 25-year-old to a 35-year-old than to a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think so. The Gen X people make a lot more sense to me than even the younger millennials, much less Gen Z or whatever. What are we? Yeah, we're Y and there's Z. Yeah, Z plus Z2 AA. What are we on now? It's the next generation AA.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be like bringing back like old sitcoms and movies. Like they're going to do like a reboot of the different generations. We're already at Z.
I think I did see someone call them Generation Alpha or something, like they're moving on to Greek letters, or I'm not sure, but yeah, but I feel that way too. And I also feel like, even though in some ways I'm very much a millennial, because I'm 34, so you and I are basically the same age. And I've long, I mean, for decades, I've said we should be doing micro generations. I think 3 to 5 years is about what a generation is at this point, with the technology changing the way it is. I mean, we just had very different experiences than people who grew up where Facebook already existed,
Right.
like you much less, they have a completely different experience of technology, completely different. And I mean, like, so my girlfriend right now was born in 1993. She's 7 years younger than I am. And that's about the last, and only because she's like from the country when there was less emphasis on electronics and stuff. So only because of that do we still have a good amount in common in terms of what our childhoods were like electronically. And we both had, like, my parents were pretty against us spending that much time watching TV or computers or anything like that, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so I think not just do we have, like, I'm a millennial in some ways, but the Gen X stuff is, very, because you and I grew up without the internet at all for quite a while, right? And then, I mean, when we were when we were 10, I mean, it's like starting to be in the libraries, or you had one, but there was dial up, and it was barely anything. You could make a cute little.
Maybe like Texas Mormon was different than, like, I'm from the Bay Area, and I was in those like AOL chat rooms, like big
yeah, as a 13-year-old. Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. At least we had actual childhoods without the internet.
Yes.
And then once we're kind of 10 plus, we started to have the internet, but like old school internet, right? Where you were on chat rooms and message boards and playing around. We were having fun. And then, even in college, it was like we were using StumbleUpon. You remember StumbleUpon.com?
Yeah.
So like the internet was like this kind of magical, fun, cool place for a while. And then it wasn't until kind of, our younger adulthoods that then it was like the stuff that it is now, YouTube, Facebook, much less all the apps, like all this stuff came in layers for us. Mm-hmm. And so we had all these phases of like, what was life like before the internet? What was life like with the beginning of, and we remember all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So that makes us, I think, just so different from the younger people. And at the same time, I just think that you and I, because of, our age, have the perspective that those Gen X people are much wiser than we are. We understand that a 55-year-old has so much to bring to the table, and they might be a little fuddy-duddy about this, that, or the other. But the reality is we know how much wiser we are now than we were 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the people who are in their young 20s, just have that classic, idealism. They have that classic, like, yeah, but we're still so much smarter than those old people because we did have the internet. I know everything and whatever. And it's like, you guys do know a lot of stuff, but you might want to listen to some of the 45, 55-year-olds because they know a lot that you don't. Wisdom is real. And I think that we're just at that age where we kind of understand that wisdom doesn't really start like that until you are in your mid 30s. And people should be spending a lot of time, I think, listening to people who are 35 to 65 years old, especially. And I just see, and those people are not as much on social media, not being as rabid. So I feel like if you get on TikTok, you see that very young people are essentially raising each other on there. It's just young people with their young ideas, not really getting questioned by people with a lot of wisdom and experience. And that stuff just spreads around there like that. That's what I get really concerned about, is how much these echo chambers are not just political, but age. People are not getting enough perspective. And the people who are 45, 55 years old, a lot of them, and the healthiest ones, are not on Twitter going, hey, no, have you thought about this? That kind of dialogue doesn't even work on Twitter. I've tried a lot, so I need to stop. I'm like, why? I finally realized like a few weeks ago, like, why am I trying to have conversations in this format?
Well, so that's like my biggest.
People are there to hate.
I'm very, as much as I have like a love-hate relationship with it, but I do think that social media is just so insidious and has completely. So I was a sophomore in college when Facebook came out, and I remember it was like so cool, and your parents couldn't be on it and all that kind of stuff. But it actually it serves like a practical purpose, just in terms of like you could see your classes and in a genuine way connect with other people. Whereas now I feel like it's completely destroyed that fabric of communication. And like, like if there was like an essay in, I don't fucking know, like, not that I ever read these when I was younger, but like in Rolling Stone or the New Yorker or whatever, and you like sit and process it, as opposed to the first thought being like, what do I find that's wrong with this or problematic, and how can I like immediately, put my say into the world. And now we have that technology to do that.
Right.
And it's not even about like, can I process this information that's been delivered, or this other perspective and consider that? It's, can I find like that perfect succinct tweet that's gonna take a dig at this thing that might end up getting me a bunch of retweets and garnering followers.
Right. And it will, I think you and I clearly are, there's some pot calling the kettle to task in what we're going to say about social media, because I think it's obviously we've fallen prey to some of these things, and they're purposefully addictive and whatnot. But so particularly with Twitter, the whole game is that we are addicted to the stress of hating people, of thinking people are stupid and bad. And whether that's particular person on Twitter saying something, or, whoever is being criticized in an article, maybe a congressperson or a famous person or whatever, you see a little article and the headline, incenses you, whatever it is. People unconsciously, I think most of the time, sometimes consciously, are addicted to the stress, the adrenaline, and also the dopamine that you get if you see notifications, if someone is interacting with you, all of that. And so it's just easy to call that up and know that you're going to get some kind of hit. And then, like, there's a part of us, we're all kind of gamblers. That's, even if you don't have a real gambling problem mind, it's in us. And so there is that feeling of, maybe I can get that 15 minutes of fame if I do say the right thing. Something could go viral at any time. Something could go viral at any time. If you say something to a celebrity or whatever, they might see that and respond. Like, it does give people that feeling of the opportunity that something amazing could happen if you just, and then people are rewarded for speed in that way too, right? You want that hot take. Something happens right away. And if you can get that quick hot take in there, then you could, I don't know, get a bunch of followers, whatever, people think that they might get out of that. So it is this perfect recipe for disaster. For all of our attention spans are shot because everything is so quick. And you can just move to the next thing and get your little hit of whichever neurochemicals you're going for. And there's that gambling aspect to it. Yeah. So we're pretty doomed. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm doing because so my girlfriend and I are almost finished working on our van. We've been kind of living van life to some extent, but now we're at her parents' place in Central Coast of California, and we're almost done. And so on Monday, we're going to be really like beginning our van life proper. And so I've been really thinking about what I want to work on in this time of simplicity and, kind of getting away from it all. And there's so much work I could do. And it's like, I want to write essays and I want to work on my podcast and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I'm like, I think my priority right now is to heal my attention span. I'm someone who's very prone to, like, I'll try to only read a few books at a time, but then it always winds up going from like my attempt to read 3 books only at a time to, it's 11, it's 15. And I'll just read a couple pages of one and then a couple pages of the next and a couple, because I want to be like making progress on all sorts of things. And I can get very scattered in, instead of doing any one thing really well, I'm just doing a lot of things a little bit shoddily. And that sucks. It's like, I'm not really achieving my goals the way I want to be. And so my big focus is like, let's slow it down and let's do things for longer stretches of time, and one thing at a time, really. And then so if I'm going to read a book, let's read this book through before just, a few pages of this, that, or the other, instead of me being like, okay, on Monday, I'm going to work on this project and this project and this project. Then on Tuesday, I'll work on projects D, E, and F. And then, and then I'll circle back. Instead of that, I want to really focus and do like work on one project for a week and then maybe the next project the next week, stuff like that. And this is all just to say like what these phones have done to us in our attention spans. I mean, we all have ADD, right? And we talk about being present. And this is what it's people want to make it all mystical, learn to be in the now, learn to be present. And so much of this is just like, we need to redevelop our attention spans. That's what being present is if you're reading a book, being there with that book and not having your mind go, I should check my Twitter, I should check my Tinder, I should check my Instagram. And you can only do that by really making yourself not go press that button.
Yeah.
You have to really, and so that's my big thing is like, I don't, I can criticize all the young people all I want for doing that, but the same thing is happening to me. And I don't, and then I find myself saying stupid shit on Twitter or something that that I'm not proud of exactly what I'm doing with my time or my energy or what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my big focus. Because I was like, do I want to focus more on spiritual journey, or is it good in van life to be like, well, I can be so productive because I won't have to do any work for other people, whatever. And I'm like, but okay, we don't need it to be this like all or nothing binary kind of spiritual journey or focus on my work. I think the thing that I want to call spiritual journey is just, like I said, it doesn't have to be mystical, be here now. What? It's just heal your attention spans, everyone. Like I need, and I even gave myself like to start on this, my girlfriend's 11-year-old niece was reading The Maze Runner. And I was like, when was the last time I just read like a purely pleasurable, easy kind of, book like that? I'm like, I don't have time for mysteries. I have nonfiction to read. I got to learn everything about everything. And so I was like, oh, the good thing about this is like one of these books like The Hunger Games or something. Yes, they're an easy reading level. And then it just propels you forward if you have some kind of storyline that, little mystery boxes everywhere and you want to know that. And so I just was like, okay, today I'll read 3 chapters in the row of this book. Tomorrow I'll read 4 chapters in a row. The next day I'll read 5. And it's so silly, but it's like, I just have to do these specific things in order to retrain my brain to stop thinking about pressing those other little buttons and what else I could be doing. And I'm just so fragmented in my brain most of the time, unless I'm recording podcasts. Like that's the most present I can be. It's like sex and podcasts, and even then, right, it creeps in during sex, that you are like thinking about other stuff. I mean, it's just horrific. And so I don't know about everybody else in the world, but I'm like, ooh, we should have done that in 2020. But instead it was like, let's be on the internet more.
Yeah.
And now that we're having a second year to think about stuff, maybe we all need to learn to, really change our relationship to the social media.
This is an aside, but something that I don't want to say struggle seems like too strong of a word, but something I've definitely noticed in the last few years with you mentioned like attention span during sex, and like, I don't know if I chalk this up to pornography or not, because when I was coming of age, as it were, like that was kind of like right when streaming porn kind of started to be a thing, and had a profound impact on me. And I can't, like, I could be with, like a super hot lady having like ostensibly great sex, and that alone won't really be enough for me. Like there has to be like some sort of I hate the word naughty. There has
role
to
playing dynamic, like a kink.
But I won't express it outwardly. Like I'm not always comfortable enough with the person.
In your mind.
Yeah, I have to be like, actually, this is the night before her wedding and she's cheating on her husband to be with me, or just something like morally depraved about it. And so I'm really not in the moment in that sense. Like I have to engage in these kind of fucked up thoughts. And I don't know if that's because of
Were you raised religiously?
Yeah, I was a hardcore Christian. Yeah.
Right. I think the wrong stuff, I think a lot of us are kind of wrongosexuals, that we get. That's, you know, it's just the thing that like puts our sexuality, gets it over the threshold into an orgasm territory or whatever, or to get it up or whatever it is. Because you know, yeah, so much of our sexuality is growing up when you're told how wrong even masturbation is, much less any kind of extramarital sex. Then you start associating, you know, sex drive and orgasms and everything with guilt, with yeah, breaking, you know, violating things. And so I think that's probably more to do with it. And I think that there's also just some amount of like, it's not necessarily that bad if you're fantasizing about something while you're having sex with someone. um that can become a problem, I think, if it's preventing you from like really connecting with someone. But if it's just a little bit of an overlay, or an underlay or whatever to your mind while that's happening, then I think that it's so normal. And it's like a lot of people really do that. And that's why some people like to kind of do that stuff with their partner, and have that be more explicit so that you're not disconnected from them. But I don't think that's about your attention span as much, or even necessarily about pornography. I just think that, yeah, that's your psychosexual stuff from your religious childhood more than anything. And so as long as you're not thinking, or if it's like, because if you're not doing that, you're going to think about Twitter, then that would be a problem, you know, I think. But if it's just, this is what I like to and I don't know if it's different for you depending on what your relationship dynamic with the woman is. Like if this is a one night stand, you're doing that. But if this is a girlfriend, are you all, I know, you know what I mean? Is
Yeah.
that different for you?
I would
Mind you
say
answering that?
the vast majority of sexual experiences I've had have been closer to the one night stand.
Short term dating.
Yeah. I would call it like San Francisco dating, where like we're not, and this is before I really understood like open relationships and polyamory, but like, yeah, we really like each other, but not enough to be boyfriend, girlfriend. So we'll just fuck other
Right.
people. Yeah.
Right. So I think, yeah, when you have the poly open kind of mindset, then it can become different. And maybe it's easier for you to really connect with people if you're not having to, if you're not pretending that you're like looking for the one, but you're just, you know, enjoying a new person and wanting to connect with them, then that can feel maybe, you know, better, freer. And then you don't have to worry so much about, is it okay that I'm thinking about someone else? Like, you know, you're just having fun. I don't know. Um, but I would wonder if, you know, once you get to the point where you are really into someone, um, and you have feelings for them, you might not do that stuff as much. You might eventually, you know, like if you kind of fell in love, let's say, if you're having in love sex, I bet you wouldn't wind up having those fantasies as much. Um, but it's just because you don't have that emotional connection with someone. There's this, you know, like you probably just need a little bit of extra. But if you really did have that emotional connection with someone, at least in the beginning when all those hormones are there and whatever, I bet you wouldn't really find yourself having those fantasies, at least until a couple years in or something. And then you're like, well, now we can bring some of the fantasies back
Yeah.
in.
So so I'm curious, one of the issues to me getting, I haven't been in like a boyfriend girlfriend relationship in years now, is I'm so focused or depressed or whatever you want to call it about where my career is at creatively,
Yeah.
that it's not that I mean, like I eventually want to get married and have kids and all that kind of stuff, but
You haven't earned a woman yet.
no, it's that it's in my brain. Like I haven't.
Right.
Does that make
Well, no,
sense?
I agree with you. No, I'm
Like,
I'm agreeing. You probably haven't earned a woman yet. I mean, it's not, you're not, what's the point in being with a man if he doesn't, you know, bring some stuff to the table? I mean,
no,
I don't have a,
I don't mean it like I don't mean like that. I mean, I hear my sister, for instance, talk about you know, she's heterosexual, whatever, being like, I want a man who's going to come home, like, I can't wait to get home after dinner, babe, and hang out every night and every waking moment to be with them. And while I want that emotion and to experience that, my career is not in a place where I can let it coast. And
right.
so it's like, no, I need to be able to, like, if comedy becomes a thing again, whatever, like, I want to be able to not feel guilty going out to a show. I want to be able to focus,
Right.
like, be alone and write a book.
Yeah, I
And I'm,
definitely tried to be like my most recent ex wife, my most recent marriage that didn't last very long, I was just focusing very much on my career, and didn't have the time for her, and I couldn't really prioritize her the way she wanted to be prioritized. And that is a real dynamic. And you'd have to find someone who was also, but I mean, I think this would be fine if you found someone who also was career focused and understood, like, hey, we're only going to have so much time for each other. And this is my priority. My career is my priority. I'm hoping that it pays some dividends for me and or both of us eventually later. And if you're a woman has the same kind of thing, she's also career focused, like she'll understand that, but so not everyone is like your sister where they're like, well, I'm ready to be, Netflix and chilling every night with my boo, like some
Yeah,
women are really happy to be like, good, because I got my own shit going on, so you better have your own shit to prioritize. Because
it's also a different dynamic though when the thing that you want to do takes place after work hours for most people. Like, have you dated a comic before? No. Do you date women with day jobs?
I've dated someone once who was a performer as well, though, and did the night kind of thing. And so, yeah, then we were living that night lifestyle together. But I've dated people all over the spectrum. And like my girlfriend now, she's more of a night owl. So, it made sense. And we were always able to make schedule stuff work. But by the time I started dating her too, I was enough further along in the comedy world that I had more control over my schedule and whatnot. But yeah, no, I absolutely understand the difficulty of that. But not everybody has a 9 to 5
Yeah.
and wants to then spend the rest of the evening every evening with each other. So there's girls out there who are bartenders, who are, taking a class, and they're this, that, there's every combination.
Yeah, no, for sure. What is the, like, I'm so confused because I see on, what was that? Oh, I'm cutting out.
Oh, you're just kind of frozen, but I can hear you now.
Okay. I'm very confused
it'll come back.
as to what is happening with comedy because I have friends so I've lived in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and then I have like I said, people in Austin, LA, wherever. And it's like, oh, comedy's dead. It's not happening. And then I'll see some people posting like, I'm doing a spot at Helium this weekend. And I'm like, what the fuck? Is it open? Is it happening? Is it not happening? Like, what is the situation?
Well, it's non-binary. It's neither happening nor not happening. Okay, as most things in life, I guess, except for gender. I'll stop. So like in Austin right now, there are some shows happening. All of the comedy clubs are not. So Cap City, for instance, went under, and maybe Joe Rogan will resurrect it. No one's really sure what's going to happen there. I know he's bought some other places to make into comedy clubs though, so I don't know if Cap City will be resurrected or not, but it's not there. But in the Velveeta Room, they own the real estate. It's owned by the people next door, and they're just able to kind of cruise like just on pause. And then people have started up shows, and even as early as like April, some shows were happening throughout all of last year. Like other than probably from like March 16th to April 4th or something, there were no shows or mics. And then a handful, because it was some small business outside of town, in a more not just conservative area where they're like, we don't care, but also numbers are very low. People in the country, people outside of cities are not mixing as much anyway. And so, that whole dynamic was happening. So there were always some shows happening. And then also, especially people who it's easy in Austin to do outdoor shows. So a lot of the shows that are happening now, of which, I mean, now I've been gone for a month and a half, but still by the time I left, there were a couple mics every weeknight at least. And there were several shows, we'll just say, from the drive-in kind to some outdoor shows to still some indoor shows that are happening. I think most of the indoor show, there are even a couple in Austin itself. Most of the indoor shows that are happening outside of town. Some with more precautions than others. And so definitely there is some amount of like freedom there. And then I'll see, oh, and then also some of the bigger shows like at the Paramount, um, there were shows happening with bigger names, but the kind of people who, you know, would do that during a pandemic, but also at the same, just because some of the more liberal, some of the more blue team comedians would never,
Yep.
but like Michelle Wolf would. And so, but when I say that, it's like at the same time they were making the Paramount be like at 25 to 50% capacity or something. So they were taking measures. Then Dave Chappelle was doing his residency for a while until he or somebody got, I can't remember who tested positive, but he was doing his
He did.
residency thing at Stubbs. Oh, he did. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he was doing this thing at Stubbs, which unfortunately the timing, I was leaving right as he got there. But the tickets are so expensive anyway, but they were rapid testing everybody who would come in there, and, they were really trying. And so that's all happening in Austin. So it's pretty vibrant in the Austin. And I think nothing is happening in some places, especially in California. But I know I see little flyers here and there for places in Illinois, for places in I know there's some shows happening throughout the country, but it's some of the clubs are doing limited capacity shows around the country, and some of the stand-up scenes definitely have their independent shows, their bar shows or whatever, whether outside or So it's just slower. It's just much diminished, but there's kind of comedy still happening throughout the country.
But so if you're like, but if you're not Michelle Wolf or you're not Dave Chappelle or
Yeah.
whoever, um, what what are the conversations that are happening in terms of like, are people having to do like career reevaluations or be like, I have to find a way to see how this can translate into fucking TikTok or something? Like, what is the dialogue that's happening?
I don't, people who were already bigger enough could transmute the situation into like Tim Dillon, Andrew Schultz. People are able to get greater listener and viewerships to YouTube and podcasts and everything like that. And then I've definitely seen some creative use of some of my funnier friends, some of whom were better or worse at stand up, but who are great at TikTok. And I'm not sure how well everyone's going to be able to like do something financially with that, but how well was any of those people doing with financially from stand up before? So some of this has always been, you got to just be passionate about it and hope that you can make something come of it eventually, monetarily. um so yeah, at every level of it, there people who've quit stand up, absolutely. um there are also tons of people in Austin, for instance, who are new at these mics, who are hitting it hard, who are going, I always wanted to do stand up, and then when I was just about to do it, or I had just started it or whatever, the virus hit, and now they're even more motivated to get out there. So it's just kind of one of these, after a forest fire, the the growth that happens from that is rich. And so yeah, we're having a we're having a moment of um which is good. We needed a good forest fire in the comedy
Yeah.
world, but hopefully what'll come out of it is going to be better, as opposed to, just the big corporations doing so well with the virus and small businesses dying. I think in the comedy world itself, I think a lot of good is going to come out of this, because people are realizing they don't always want to be based out of LA or New York. That some people want to go into the medium-sized cities, that we want to have just kind of a rich network of vibrant cities and comedy scenes that we can all travel to, because most like people who are stand-ups, like we love traveling. Most of us love going to different cities, and don't necessarily want to be based in LA, especially, but New York for other reasons. And so I think it's a really cool thing that's happening. And a lot of us have always been kind of like, money being great is a low priority anyway. And so that's part of, like with the van life, if you can just get your bills down, reduce your bills, you can live on a lot less. A lot of the money we all spend, we don't need to. So if what you really care about is actually doing stand up, I think that what's happening here is going to be really, really great. Um, yeah, for our ability to kind of be touring, traveling comedians at every level.
Yep.
But it's going to take a while. We still have, I mean, I don't know how this year's going to go. I don't know what the vaccine situation is going to be, but it's going to be a while until things are kind of back to a new normal, you know?
Like, I'm not happy anybody's died, obviously, or anyone's lost their livelihood. But like, if I'm just being completely honest in my own selfishness, like
Mm-hmm.
I was more or less living in New York when this all started, and I was actually getting back into stand up at that point. But it definitely was a bit of a relief to me, just having seen my peers when I first started in like 2011, that, you know, they'd been on like Colbert and booked all these, you know, Conan, all that kind of stuff. It was like the world was on pause a little bit, and it honestly made me feel a little bit better about myself. Like, if that makes any sense, especially in a city like New York, where you're like, once all that stuff stopped, it became so apparent. And I know everyone doesn't feel this way, but to me, that like, that really is what made that city, was the nightlife, the stand up, you know, the dining, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, particularly in winter, and, you know, I was in Brooklyn. It is a dirty, cold, expensive, gross ass city, you know?
Yes.
And like,
it's always that, but the nightlife makes up for it when it's there. Yeah. It you know, it's one of the most magical places on earth, but it's also one of the most disgusting and places. And you can really just have a lot of hatred festering in your heart all the time, you know, because there's just, you're aggravated, and then you can turn and just be aggravated by so many different types of people, and you're cold and it smells. I mean, and so, yeah, if you don't have that nightlife, it's just insane. So yeah, and I mean, what you're talking about, that sense of relief, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you and me. I definitely felt that sense, even though things like, in some ways I had some momentum, you know, going, that it's kind of weird to lose. But at the same time, it's like, momentum toward what? I mean, there's so much pressure to make some choices right in your career and figure out the timing of when you're going to do this. And, um, you know, and then how to have healthy relationships at the same time that you're doing all this, and having to prioritize your career in this way. But it's also vague what you're really supposed to do, unless you want to go into like this track of, I'm going to move to LA or New York to get a job, like, you know, a writing job or blah blah blah, you know. It's like I was pedaling with 6 feet but not sure which direction I need to go to, you know. And so this has been a real chance for us all to stop and reflect and slow down. And when I started finally doing stand up, I was 27, and it was like such a relief to finally have one thing that I really wanted to focus on and pour myself into. And I'd always been like someone who worked on so many different little projects at once, and now I had this thing that I could just do that and let almost everything else fall away almost completely. And then some years in, you start thinking, okay, well, now I have some time for some other things a little bit, and that's fun. But the virus, it changed it. So it's like, okay, I really have some time now where I could actually like not feel compelled, because it feels weird to do anything less. 4 nights a week is like a hard minimum almost always. Feels much more comfortable to be doing at least 5 or 6 nights a week of stand up, and taking even, you know, 3 days in a row off, like shoot me in the head, you know. And so having this, it was just like such a because if everyone else is doing all the stand up, then you have to, you know. Because and you hear these people, especially the tough New York guys, just like I have 28 sets a week is my minimum. And so, you know, if that's what everyone's doing, you kind of have to really keep up with that, because that's the Olympics that we're in. And so this was the first time where it was like, okay, let's all like really take some time. So it's a huge relief.
Specific to New York, it just blew my mind. So I had some guys I started out with, or maybe they were a couple years ahead of me. Some of the, you know, this is in San Francisco, some of the funniest people, you know, regulars at the Punchline headlining there. And then when I moved to New York, I would see them at all these mics. And, you know, at this point they had been, they were like 8, 9, 10 years in, and they were just going to all the mics all the time. And it was extensive. Like they were no further along in that regard than someone who was literally their first week doing an open mic. And I was like, what
the masochism of sets per week became fetishized. And it's the same way you'll hear successful people say, oh, I did it this way, and I know that this is what it took for me to get my career. And it's like, we're all in different situations. Different people have different kind of talents and abilities and opportunities that come to them. And so people can hear that, whether it's no one's funny for the first 10 years, or you're going to bomb for your first 2 years, or I did 4 nights, 4 sets a night for the first 7. People hear that and they think that's the formula. And so there's completely untalented people who just will never be funny. Their IQ is too low, or whatever it is. I mean, just a whole set of factors. But they hear, oh, I'm supposed to bomb for the first 2 years and not be funny for the first 10 years. So they think they're just putting in their time because some insanely talented person, said that. And that happened to be their experience because they were doing really difficult rooms. If you're doing really difficult rooms to 6 people in New York, in a basement where half the people are looking at their phones, you're going to bomb for 2 years. But if you're in Austin where the audiences are very generous, almost always, and you're bombing for 2 months, always bombing, quit. And so people just they hear that stuff and they think, and so there's people who just think I'm going to tough it out. But what we always have to remember is that for a lot of these people, this is not really their career, but this is their community and their social life and the thing that gives their lives some, not just meaning and purpose, but some fun, some thrill, some challenge. And it's also just okay if those people also probably have day jobs. Hopefully they're not just bums. But if they want to kind of, go to all those mics every week and just keep doing that, and that's fun, and, then there's always going to be some of that. But the people who are, trying to decide how they want to live their lives, like, it's not the only option, especially anymore. It used to be. There used to not be that many options for doing stand-up, but now forget all the internet stuff, but you can move to a city that's more generous with their audiences, with their stage time, with whatever. And you can potentially have a lot more productivity. If it's easier to wind up getting your 10, 12, 15-minute sets in front of good audiences, you can learn a lot from doing that a few times a week, as opposed to, it's easier to get an hour of stage time a week because you're just pretty good at stand-up in Austin than it is racking up 4-minute sets, 1 mic at a time in New York.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of options, and you don't have to just beat yourself up and think, well, as long as it hurts, then that means something good's going to come out of it later. Mm-hmm.
I do. Yeah. I mean, like, I do hope that it does change that paradigm of the 2 cities thing. And not even like that Austin will become the next New York, but that just things can be a little more decentralized in general.
Yeah.
Like,
nobody wants it. Well, Austin becoming the next New York, that would be interesting. More likely becoming the next LA.
Sure.
And that's not what I think what anybody wants.
But like, it would be nice to know that you could be, the funniest person in Austin could have just as much name recognition or success as whatever the funniest person in New York. Or I don't know. It's like I said, like, seeing those guys, they're not, and women, like, they're not dumb or bad. It's like they're amazing at incredible stand-ups, but I would just see him at the mics every night, and it was like the funnel was so small for the talent to go through.
Yeah.
Like, they're hoping that some, like some underground fucking
happen to see them.
Yeah, some executive's gonna be like, I'm gonna go to Bushwick and go to this pizza parlor downstairs. Yeah, like, so I don't know. It's a just pre-COVID, like, oh, that life, that grind can be so depressing sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also really fun. But anyway, let's talk about something more interesting than, because I feel like we should be more controversial or something. I don't know how many people, I'm sure a lot of people are interested in the inside baseball of
Berlin. Yeah, Berlin actually, and fuck it. All right, we'll move on. So I did the thing that I started off with, like, I am curious what your not only just like the essay and your relationship to gender, but like, what was the response? Did you get any, was there any backlash to that? And just, like, it's tell the listeners a little bit like what it is you wrote.
I wrote a piece because okay, so on medium.com, there's this place where you can just anyone can go write anything. Some like real journals publish their stuff there too, but also it's basically a blog. But we can call it essays, you can call it whatever you want, but you can actually get paid on there. So instead of just your regular blog, you can make money from that. So I decided I wanted to start writing and just publishing things there. And I have made some money, so this is cool. So this is one way I want to make money in van life, but I just need to start writing a lot instead of giving away everything free to Twitter or everywhere else. You can actually, try to get paid from your stuff. And so the piece that I wrote was called, I think, why I don't why I don't ask for pronouns or announce mine, something like that. And it's basically uh, we have decided the queer ideology now, the left, however we want to say this, the queer left has decided that at some point it was this always ask for pronouns, which was on the face of things ridiculous. No one in the real world is going to ask literally everyone they ever meet for pronouns, but that was kind of the idea. They were like, well, if trans people are the only ones saying their pronouns, then they'll be number one outed as trans, but that's just, it could be triggering for them or something. So we want to ask everyone for their pronouns so that people who we're not sure about don't get left out, or this kind of this, that, or the other. And it was just like, okay, well, I guess so. Like in queer situations, maybe it makes sense to just go ahead and ask everyone at the gay bar for their pronouns when you meet them. But no one was going to do that at Thanksgiving, so
Right.
let's just be realistic for one. And but that was kind of, I think, just kind of understood. People would say always ask for pronouns, but if they were being realistic, they would know that they really only meant like in queer context, or if you were going to be asking one person in a 6-person circle for their pronouns, let's just ask for everyone, so it doesn't seem like you're singling someone out who has long hair and an Adam's apple and you're not sure, you know. Um, but then in the past few years, people started adding their pronouns to their bios, whether it's in their email or in their Twitter bios or what have you. And even in the past few months, I mean, you're seeing a lot of stuff where it's like, well, if the vice president puts pronouns in her bio, then what's your excuse? Seeing stuff like that where people are kind of being shamed for not putting pronouns in their bio. That became, and people explicitly saying that like everyone should put their pronouns in their bio if you want to be an ally, if you want to whatever, because you need to normalize that, because if we all do it, then trans non-binary people won't feel weird, or it won't whatever. And so that's the idea. I mean, I think I can't say with any of these things what percentage of queer people or what percentage of trans people or what percentage of trans non-binary people actually believe that everyone should put their pronouns in their bio or their email signature. Who knows? But there's some really adamant people online who want us to do that, and want to shame people who don't do that, or just that's how you can know who's on team good or team bad, is whether those pronouns in their bio. And I absolutely am opposed to that, for a lot of reasons. Number one, I don't think that we need to be constantly announcing our gender identity. Um, that is very weird to me. And as I say in the piece, it's kind of like, oh, here we are criticizing people who want to do gender reveal parties or sex reveal parties or gamete reveal parties or whatever we want to call this. We want to criticize people who are maybe piercing their baby girl's ears and putting a little pink bow in their hair. And everyone's like, she's a girl. Everyone needs to be very clear. And yet we are doing a gender reveal party for ourselves every time someone reads our bio or our email signature. And so there's one thing of that where I'm like, it's not always something that I want people to be having in their minds, especially because there is all kinds of sexism or, stereotyping in our minds. Do we really want people to always be like, oh, okay, so that was a girl who's saying that? Oh, okay, so that was a they who was saying that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's a guy. Do we want to just tell people that all the time and have people thinking about gender and classifying? It's like when if someone cuts you off in traffic, let me go see what they were. Oh, okay, Caucasian 40-year-old male or whatever. We just want to know. And I don't know that that's always beneficial for us to be constantly centering gender identities in people's minds. So that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, um, we are now in this place where we're elevating gender identity over biological sex. We're not even supposed to use the phrase biological sex because now I'm a TERF or I'm something, because I'm even talking about the concept of biological sex. And it's like, okay, well, I just need to be able to talk about things, for one thing, talk about reality. And so, with pronouns, the way that we were doing it in English was encoding information into our dialogue that was letting people know what sex someone was. That might be important information if you want to know whether you might be potentially interested in someone romantically. It might be important information if you want to know whether to be afraid of someone. It might be important information for you to just know if this is more of a testosterone person or more of a um, complicated estrogen, testosterone, progesterone cycles that fluctuate, and your skin is more permeable to feeling things. I mean, whatever the difference is there, it might be important to know the sex of someone in stories that you're reading or conversations that you're having with friends. And it might be important to you to know what their gender identity is, for all kinds of other reasons that are kind of vague and hard to explain. But um, like, what are those reasons? Because you want to know whether they hang out with girls or boys more. I don't know. But either way, if we're going to be encoding some information into sentences and into dialogue, into essays, into articles, if it's going to be either biological sex or gender identity, I don't really see why we're so sure that someone's gender identity is more important than someone's biological sex. I'm not sure we need either of them. We could go in some direction where we call everyone some version of them. Um, it's really hard to get us all to agree on a pronoun dynamic. So I don't know that we're going to do that. But my point is just more like there isn't really a perfect answer. I I don't know my gender identity, quite frankly. I am very confused by people who are very sure of what their gender identity is. Not just like with trans or non-binary people, but I'll ask audiences in my stand-up sometime. I'm like, so are y'all like I'm a man or I'm a woman? Like if you like meditate and you're still and you're like going inside, I'm like, okay, clap if you're like, I'm for sure a man or I'm for sure a woman. And it's interesting because typically somewhere around 50% of people will clap. And this is just normal, not non like queer audiences, just kind of any audience.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, and I get pretty good. I know how to talk to an audience to make sure that I'm getting full participation or pretty full participation in my little survey questions. And so this is pretty consistent finding that some people are very like, yeah, I am a man or I'm a woman. And then what I kind of will say to people is like, okay, so then when a whole new world comes on, do you guys only sing Aladdin or Jasmine, like one or the
Right.
other? Because I'm every part,
Yeah.
in like I mean, and it's just like I don't know if I'm a man or a woman, but I'm definitely a Leo. I'm not sitting out any part of these things, and and I genuinely don't for myself if I'm meditating and going inside. I don't have any sense of man or woman. I have that, you know. Um, Now I know that I'm biologically female. I have all the evidence. Not that I have more body hair than some women and face hair, and I've had some missed period. Like I have um, some hormonal, some slightly like non-average hormonal situation. I think I it doesn't matter my theories on my hormones, but point being, I do have a female hormone cycle and all of the attendant things, and I have the wider hips and the smaller lungs and and heart and everything like that. And so I have that relationship, and I definitely feel boyish. I growing up, I was forced to wear like skirts and dresses at Mormon church, and there's always things like that, and I've always hated anything that's like clothes marketed to women. Anything where they're bringing the waist in makes me want to kill myself. um, I I hate most feminine kind of things, like whether it's nails on my like painting my fingernails. I've had to do that for a couple of people's weddings. I'm not in a long time. I wouldn't do it anymore.
They make you paint your
But
nails for a
I
wedding?
yeah, like your sister's getting married and
Oh,
all the
okay.
bridesmaids are doing something. And then at this point, we didn't have like a lot of these gender options. And that's so I'm really happy about we've loosened up a lot about gender. We've kind of come to realize like, oh, some people are boyish or girlish or whatever, and it's like we can treat me like some kind of hybrid. We don't like I don't like I could be a bride's person who and so yeah, if I have my fingernails are painted, I feel like a transvestite. Like it's the only you know description, and I guess transvestites enjoy that feeling, so I don't feel like a transvestite. I feel like someone being forced into transvestism. um
It's a
and
Mormon's
it's the same
nightmare.
thing, like there are some yeah, and there are some quite feminine things that don't bother me, and especially as I get older and a little bit more comfortable with my gender, I think that I can be a little bit more playful. But feminine things really bother me, and I kind of say like she, her, dude, sir, to kind of give people a vibe like I'm fine, because it's also very important to me that people know my sex. um and that's why my bias is toward, like, if we're going to encode one of these things into pronouns, I would rather people understand that I am biologically female, because I can't compete with men in terms of strength. I don't want, like, yeah, I'm boyish and maybe my soul is a boy, or maybe my soul is fluid, or, I'm not really sure. Um, but I don't have the testosterone. I cannot compete strength. Not to mention that I didn't have the childhood. I don't have any of the skills that I should have if I were a boy, if I were a man. Could never be a man. I would need to go through a 10, 20-year boot camp to be some kind of man. And so I don't want, like my girlfriend's parents, it would be a completely different situation if I were a man, how they would judge me for where I'm at in life or what I know how to do or whatever. So I just can't compete, not to mention, yeah, I'm more sensitive because
Yeah.
I'm female. Not like just emotionally, but like our skin is literally more sensitive. Men's is leatherier. You don't feel the heat and the cold the way I do, etc. And so I'm just like, my gender identity is my business.
Yeah.
And this pronoun thing, and I don't even know what my gender identity is. So apparently it's not even my business.
Right. Right.
Okay. And so, I would rather us, not have to out me. It's like, that's kind of the situation I feel in, is the queers who all want to be like, well, inside I'm this. And so everyone needs to know that and recognize that and whatever. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being forcefully outed. And as, so like, for instance, when my last boss was a trans woman, and she came in, it was like during the corona times. We were just meeting again, and and she was the new boss, and she was coming in, and we were all sitting around in a circle, and she starts off by saying, hey, we're going to go around and do um, names and pronouns and how long you've worked for the company. And it's like, oh, of course you want to do that, I guess, because you're trans and that's what, whatever. But also, like, we all already know you're she, her. Like with the trans people, especially if they've been trans for a while, if they've been, whatever, like, um, we can tell what you're going for, unless they're one of these ones who wants to be she, they, or he, they. And then okay, let us know that if you want us to mix it up. Um, but the interesting thing was, this was a group of people who, yeah, the boss was trans, and so she's she, her, and she started off with that. Everyone else in the group was either cisgender or, like normal gender, normative gendered. Um, one of whom was like, is like his foreign in a way where she didn't even understand the question and just skipped right over it. No one said anything. And then two of us are basically like me, another vagina person whose gender is kind of like a shrug, a lesbian who, but also she's, I don't know, she's just kind of a complicated person. And she and I talk about it where we're like, he, she, if you want to go, for her especially, like if you want to go they, like, all right, cool. But like, I'm just not, I'm just kind of whatever, fluid and spectrumy and amorphous about my gender. And so the two of us are like then kind of forced into this pronoun thing.
Mm.
And with the pronouns, it's like if you quote unquote have pronouns, some people are going to just see you as one of the eye roll people. The look at me people, as some people have criticized it, like non-binary identities are the look at me identities, which there is some of that. And so you're either kind of outed as a particular kind of liberal, basically, not necessarily, but that's how a lot of people are going to see you if you have pronouns, or you're going to be seen as potentially the wrong kind of liberal or the wrong kind of queer. Me identifying as and saying that I care more about people knowing my biological sex than anything else, it's definitely verging into that area where people can accuse me of being the wrong kind of feminist who might exclude people from my version of feminism, which none of that even, none of the words in trans exclusionary radical feminist are something that I could, be like, exclude trans people from my feminism. I don't even know what it would mean to exclude someone from my version of feminism. I'm not a radical feminist. I've seen some of the stuff they say. So I think I agree with them. Some places I disagree with them, other places I am some kind of feminist, but I've never found a wave of feminism where I'm like, well, that's me. I like, I don't think this is a joke worth doing, but I thought the other day, like, no, I'm not a third wave or a fourth wave feminist. I think I'm a first particle feminist. What do you think? No? Okay.
So you said, I mean, there's so much that you just said that is, I think, like really important and missing from. It's either if these conversations are being had, like they're not being had in this online sphere for fear of that's kind of like, as we previously discussed, kind of retribution for that. And
yeah, which is absolutely the case, absolutely the case, because I do talk to people in real life, lots of new people all the time. I have one-on-one conversations. That's what I do with most of my time.
Yeah.
And absolutely, this stuff is just not being said online, but people have a lot of thoughts and opinions in the real world.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, I am like a self-described, like, I guess politically very much on the left, but I mean, I don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to say in terms of politics, but I'm on the left for sure. However, I feel like the liberalism, if you will, that I was raised with, like I went to UC Berkeley, all that kind of stuff, was about let's all just be human beings who like love each other, and regardless of sex, orientation, race, all that kind of stuff. And like really like the dream, the liberal dream was to not do away with those things, but to recognize they're there, value them for what they are, but ultimately just value each other for being like decent human beings to each other. And in such a short span of time, it's completely flipped where it's like, yeah, the first thing, you haven't even met somebody, and literally jobs I've applied to, like in the HR, like you said, the signature line, it has like their gender pronouns, and then sometimes they'll send like a questionnaire asking you for yours, and you're like, dude, I haven't even met you yet, It's
right, and it's going to get to the point where are we going to then add race to the bios?
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Should we go ahead and yeah, we're making these demographic questions the paramount. We're making them the thing that we're focusing on and putting first. And it's like, that would be insane. It would be, it's just, well, it is insane. And here we're doing it, and it's satirizing itself constantly. So I would not be surprised if it started by some somebody putting BIPOC in their signature, and then a year later you're being asked why you're not putting white, even though, I mean, do not get me started on, well, I will just try to succinctly say this. We have to stop calling some people white, straight up. We have to stop doing that. Race white is, what the fuck are we even talking about? And when I say this, I'm like, I'm not trying to say that, oh, hey, I don't think of myself as white, and so I don't want to be seen that way, because I'm not trying to like divest myself of the awareness of my privilege. Okay, absolutely, there are tons of privilege, but we're just, first of all, it's inaccurate. No one is white. And so on an archetypal level, what we're doing is pretty disturbing, to say there are some people who are white. First of all, white versus black archetypally, a lot going on there. But even just like, there's white people and then there's white people and then there's colorful people. So we're dividing the world into this, even though white could mean anything from like, way Eastern European people to, some people include the Portuguese and some don't. Some, like depending on kind of what is white, Canadians and British people and Germans and Scandinavian. I mean, there's so many different things going on. And it's like, well, and Irish people used to not be white because they were so poor and freckled or whatever and looked down on, that it doesn't make sense for us to be like, this is one race, the white. Okay, we're very, there's, yeah, like I said, Russians and Germans and whatever. It's there are a lot of different ethnicities that are just being grouped under there because of weird. Some of it is about color of skin, but some of it is about just historical dynamics. I would say we can call ourselves wheat. And I think that would solve a lot of problems. Number one, that's more accurate. We can still speak of wheat privilege, but I don't think that wheat supremacy will be very catchy to people. We can just nib that. And it's easy to swap out.
Gluten's not fashionable anymore either. That's a problem.
Exactly. That'll kind of annoy some of the wheat women that no one likes, right? JK. But what I'm saying is, if we need a descriptor, if we want to kind of talk about people, we can talk about colors a little bit. Like if we wanted to, because generally speaking, wheat, if you want to get a vibe of, in shorthand, if you need to be able to talk about people, okay, you can do that. Otherwise, shouldn't we be saying more just like, oh, I'm kind of an American English, American European hybrid, I'm American African, I'm American Mexican, I'm American this or that. I mean, for, speaking of Americans. But if we're going to be talking about this stuff, we could be more specific, but just grouping people into it, like we're perpetuating the system if we continue to call some people white.
Well,
the whiteness itself as a concept is a colonial. People want to talk about colonialism, colonialized ideas. We need to dismantle whiteness. And it's like, we're going to have to stop calling people that. It's crazy that you'll get, like, I think I was filling out something for the Affordable Care Act, getting insurance.
Yeah.
And they ask you what race you are. And they list like, oh, Filipino, Japanese, blah, 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 blah. And then white.
Right.
I'm like, okay, so everybody else is like a country of origin ethnicity, but then we're just going to group. I would rather them say like, are you more of a WASP or kind of like an Italian, like one of the, like, get specific with it, whatever, but we can't call people white. And like I said, I know people want people to still be able to recognize their privilege, but we can say wheat privilege. We can talk about that, but we're the pure, clean people. That's a supremacist idea. Sure. To have the archetype. And it's like, no, we're not. We're brown. We're just really light brown, but we're brown just like everybody else. All the little monkey gods in the world are all brown, except for the gingers and albinos. But exceptions prove the rule.
You're going back to the gender thing. Your example with like feeling unduly outed when you're forced in a situation where you have to use pronouns. I feel like that's that's one of many examples where the left it pisses me off that they can't see this happening, that they're eating themselves alive where
Yeah.
the policies and the strategies, if you will, that they're enacting, like, which again is supposed to be to like make this world a better place, like they're never going to be able to live up to their own standards, and it's going to end up being counterproductive, not only in bringing other people on board, but they end up excommunicating like their own kind, and alienating them. And uh, I was at, not to say it's exactly the same thing, but like I was at this like play party thing in Chicago, whatever. That's a phrase I'm not a big fan of either, but I was at like, whatever, like kind of a queer, kind of kinky party. And yeah, this guy, like, just out of nowhere, like we were in a group talking. He's like, okay, everyone go around and say how they identify and what their kinks are. And while I understand that in like a practical sense in that environment,
Yeah.
I like by like the textbook definition, I guess I'm queer. Like, I guess I've slept with dudes. I used to be a gay for pay escort, and
Tight.
but I taught toy, but
Tight.
I, but like overwhelmingly, I'm into women. But am I way gayer than your average straight guy? Like, sure. Like, have I sucked
Yeah.
many dicks? But like, I don't know. It just, so when it got to me, I was just like, I don't know, man. I identify as down to party. Like, whatever
Yeah.
comes my way, like I'll deal with in that moment. But not only did it make me feel kind of weird and then like unnecessarily putting people in boxes at that time, but there was also just that kind of
Yeah.
virtue signaling thing that he was doing. Like, hey, let's be cool, guys. I'm going to be the guy to make sure that we're all
Yeah.
comfortable with each other by stating, I don't know. It just really
Right.
irked me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some moral grandstanding to the whole endeavor of asking for pronouns a lot of times, or how you identify. It's like, how I identify. I don't even understand what an identity is. I'm confused by that word. What we identify as thing, because it's like people like, you can identify as Black, but you also just are, and it's the same thing with like identify. Like, what do you mean? Like, do I currently identify with the concept? Like, well, I'm pretty fluid about like what I'm identifying as, I guess. But so yeah, like, what do I identify right now? You then have to ask the person, what are my pronouns in this moment? It depends on who I'm talking to personally. My pronouns are whatever yours are, I'll tell people, Um, and but it's hard to get everyone to kind of like understand that people want these boxes, like you say, to put people in. And I think about it in terms of, one of the big like ridiculous jokes right now is the idea that when we talk about sexuality, oh, some people will be like, well, gay men are men who are attracted to other men. Gay women are women who are attracted to other women. And it's like, for a lot of us, we're actually homosexual, where we're more attracted to people of our own sex. So I might date a trans man, as I have, who is only on testosterone for a few months. And like, whereas I would have way more hesitation to date a trans woman, one, because I've never done penis ball stuff, and so like that's its own whole question. But also it's just like, I'm not attracted to women. I'm not attracted to like, I mean, femininity and masculinity are different than just men and women, but still, like, uh, when I'm attracted to lesbians, like, I tend to be attracted to ones who are like feminine, but also have some masculinity to them, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm attracted to the women end of the spectrum. Like, I want high heels and dresses and whatever. And it's, it's like not that. And when I say like I'm attracted to females, um, trans women who are taking hormones and stuff are making themselves more biologically female. I'm sorry, like, I got in trouble for saying that before to some trans people. Others are fine with it. But they are, even if they're like in some way biologically female, inherently, even if that is true, which it might be. Some people think that trans women have a sort of intersex condition where some part of them is biologically female, despite any chromosomal or hormonal or gonadal evidence to the contrary. There's still something going on there that's biologically female, and that may be true. But still, when you take estrogen and testosterone blockers, you are making yourself more female, and so eventually, my mind body system might be attracted to some trans women because their fat distribution now is the kind that my mind body system is attracted to. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Their personality, their skin, whatever, their hair, all those things do change. And I know I have at least been attracted to one trans woman that that was in an audience in a show once, and I didn't really realize until after the show. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, there you go. Now I know that I can at least be attracted to a trans woman. So I'm not saying that like I'm homosexual in the way of like I could never be with a trans woman because they're men. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it's not like I can choose who I'm attracted to. And what I'm noticing, like how I work, I am attracted to femaleness. Um, and so that all being said, if we were to go around the room and say how we identify or what our pronouns are or whatever, especially in some kind of like queer sexual context, it's this a little bit of a weird thing of um why, so I can know who I'm attracted to or not because of how they identify. I don't give a shit how anyone identifies. If I'm into you, I'm going to be into you. If I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I don't need to put some overlay. I don't need to hear how you want me to see you. I'm going to see you how I see you. You
Yeah.
can't change that. And it doesn't matter, like the trans dude, when I met him, he was hitting on me after a show, and I thought, oh, this is one of the little boy lesbians. I
Yeah.
always thought the little boy lesbians were cute.
Yeah.
Now, some minutes into the conversation, he tells me he's actually, I'm a guy, I'm a trans guy. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, and I wound up dating him for a few months. But if we had gone around a room before that interaction and he had said he, him, blah, 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 I probably wouldn't have given him the time of day because I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know that. I could have still been intrigued where I was at and whatever. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, it might have changed things, but my mind was more open because I was just seeing him as a person
Yeah.
and interacting with him on that level before then adding some information in there about how he identifies.
Yeah.
All well and good, but like, I just would rather have that openness with people. I don't want the spoiler alert, you know? I just want to take people in, and I want people to take me in and just see how you think of me. I think it's quite weird for me to give you some information. And again, so much of it, we're not just giving information about our gender identity when we give our pronouns. You're also, at this point, at least, in in our culture, you're also giving a lot of political information if you quote unquote have pronouns.
Yeah. So that's what I was gonna say. Like the when I was talking about like by the textbook definition, I would be queer. Like I am askew of whatever you want to say, like this binary norm is. But I fucking hate that term because when I say that, carries all of this political baggage with it, and that I'm supposed to feel a certain way or be on team this or that.
Well, right. You thought, you were surprised by my politics, right?
Sure.
So just me looking like I look, there's a lot of stereotype. Like I'll joke, when a lot of times I'm, starting off in my stand up, I'm joking about how I know that I look pronoun-y, so let me go ahead and address it. People are assuming that a lot. It used to just be that people would assume I'm a vegetarian, but now it's just like it's this whole thing. Now, yeah, they, them, vegetarian, I think is the first thing that comes to people's minds when they see my face. And, that's fine because I can play with those stereotypes and whatnot. But it would be even harder if I did actively identify, I think, in some kind of non-binary way. It would be harder for me to win people back over to the idea that I'm not going to be kind of politically the stereotype. If I was also they, them or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's even like as a guy who's like 99, I mean, again, whatever. I tend to mostly fuck women. Yeah. The allies, the good, the people on the good side, whatever you want to say, like who ostensibly like I love queer people and I'm all for queerness. Maybe they identify as queer. I've even experienced where those same women though wouldn't want to date a guy who's queer because when a guy says he's queer, like it's a little gayer than like a woman who could be kind
of lesbianism. Yeah, everyone likes lesbianism, but a lot of us have some kind of homophobia some antipathy, some true repulsion around male homosexuality, whereas almost no one has that for lesbianism. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I mean, I think
do you want to have to out yourself?
like everyone, to each their own. You like what you like, but it's just so funny to me when I'll hear kind of frequently, some women speaking ill of like white dudes and their heteronormativity and the patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, like they would never, then they're using terms like fragile masculinity and soy boy, and they want to get fucked hard by Jason Momoa, and I'm like, well, fuck. Like, do you want your sensitive ass dude
Yeah.
and getting rid of that toxic masculinity?
And some
Or
of it is just like different women want different things, but definitely women are divided in themselves.
yeah.
Sorry, you did freeze for a second.
Yeah, no, I know the internet. The internet here is not the greatest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like the left is just really hard for me because I feel like they kind of want it both ways. It's like gender's just a construct and not real, and we're making all this up, which I can kind of get on board with in some sense. But then they're like, no, gender's the most important thing ever. Like, tell us how you feel about it and how you identify. And on my old show, which was about like sex and dating, I would interview so many trans people who'd undergone hormone therapy, and they would say like, yeah, you can say these are cliches, but these are not, it's not all societal norms and pressures that are causing this binariness of men and women. They're like, if they were a male to female and they started testosterone blockers and taking estrogen, they'd say, I got more sensitive. I started to cry more. My sex drive plummeted. I wanted more like group emotional relationships. And then the opposite, if they were female to male, like their sex drive shot through the roof. They wanted to punch walls more when they got angry. They stopped crying. Like, you can't deny this, like the science.
Hormones are the most determinative thing about us. I mean, other than just like we are genetically, we have our own stuff going on, but hormones, I just mean in terms of when people want to say genitals don't equal gender. Okay, yeah, but hormones do to a large extent. Or when it's like, oh, because of my penis, my vagina. It's like, no, because of your hormonal dynamic.
Yeah.
That's whether I'm going to be attracted to you or afraid of you, or you should whatever, like hormones. And some of it has to do with also what hormones you had in utero, much less at puberty, much less whatever's going on right now. Hormones are different for men and women of all kinds throughout our life cycles. Different things are changing, whatever. But hormones just are so determinative of what we're like. And anyone who denies that, to me, is just pretty insane. Even though, there's a range of what's going on with hormones, but males have a very different hormone pattern, and the testosterone, y'all have like 100 times more testosterone than we do. Our one testosterone spike in the month is pretty minimal relative to it's just like, that's why hormone replacement therapy is so big in the trans world, is because that is the thing that does really let you become, more than anything else, more than genital surgery, that's the thing that allows you to really be in the mind body system that you feel like you should be in.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just look at, I don't know what it's like in Austin, but in San Francisco, like, right, one of the gay capitals of the world, the Lexington was the only dedicated lesbian bar. And that, like, I think 10 years ago, like, shut down. Whereas like the gay bars were still thriving because like men like to go out and fuck. And I'm not saying like women don't like to do that, but there are some
not
truths that
much.
Like testosterone is great for business.
Well, anytime you want to just say like, hey, look, men are stronger and hornier than women, there's always some feminist who, some weird, whatever wave of feminist, I think third usually, who's like, no, we're just as horny as men. And it's like, maybe you are at this point in your life, 3 days of the month or whatever, but no, that is not true. I mean, I'm at my sexual peak right now. I'm 34. I'm pretty horny, whatever, but it's still like, I've heard, trans men discuss kind of going through that teenage, like the teenage boy puberty in their adulthood. I've heard people, men discuss their puberty or their situation. Like the urge is very different. Even when you're super, super horny, the difference between the male and the female, or the testosterone driven and the other our complicated female horniness, it's just very different. There's not the sense of urgency that scrotum people have is completely different than the sense of urgency that we have, and there's even like kind of like violent urges, or just the psychology of it is completely different from the accounts that I've heard of what y'all feel like versus what we feel like. It's just not the same. It is just not the same, and which makes sense. It makes sense
Yeah.
for
I
us not to be the same.
I can't get on a bus without being like, I would fuck that person, probably fuck that person, not gonna fuck that. Like, and you're not in a violent way, like, but you like these thoughts, you just
Right.
can't help. Like they're constantly going through your head. Um,
Right. And
it,
I have nothing like that. I mean, in fact, I wish, because it's like, because sometimes guys want to check out women with me, and sometimes we can, but like the reality of it is, I see face first and foremost.
mm,
And then if the face is something that I'm really into, then I might go, oh, does she also have nice boobs and butt and thighs or anything? But I'm attracted to almost no one. It's like so exciting when I am particularly attracted to someone. If I get on a bus and look around and there's someone I'm attracted to, it's like, oh, amazing. Should I go and talk to her? This never happens. And so completely different. And whereas I think with men, y'all tend to, I mean, I know face is important to some of y'all, whatever, but y'all tend to be pointing out ass and boobs to me. And the face may or may not be any good. And so I'm like, yeah, there's quite a big difference there too.
yeah, yes. Um, I'm going to tie this back into the theme of the show somehow, and then we'll wrap it up. But so one thing I've noticed, and if I got really disillusioned with the U.S., and again, it's just like online infighting, all that kind of stuff. And I did notice traveling outside the states the last few years that didn't seem to be nearly as prevalent in a good way. But like as always, I feel like the U.S.'s culture is its biggest export, and
Mm-hmm.
living in Berlin, Germany, which like kind of considers itself like the Brooklyn of Germany. Um, that's changing in a way that I think is kind of unfortunate. And I was a little scared in terms I was able to do stand up before the lockdown started again there. And I was a little like worried about stepping on toes and all that kind of stuff. But where would you say, so I'm seeing it get like very politically correct in a way that's like not helping anybody. It's just like obfuscating the truth in terms of, where does Austin sit, like compared to the coastal cities? Obviously it's known for being a liberal city, but it is in Texas, and yeah.
Yeah, but it is a pretty, as a liberal city, these liberal cities, particularly the ones in red states, there can be even a little bit more political correctness sometimes, and at least certain. Okay, well, Austin kind of reminds me of Chicago in that way, where and different people have kind of different experiences of these cities depending on which stand-up mics or shows that you do in them. Because in certain neighborhoods, at certain shows, it's definitely like, oh God, everybody here is pretty leftist, pandering, politically correct. And if you say something out of that, it could be I mean, particularly if you're at least visibly, if you seem like a cis straight white guy, whatever, you got to like really play by the rules or whatever, whereas I could get away with more. But even then, like I can get in trouble for offending people with my heterodoxy. But it just depends on the show, because in Chicago and in Austin, and same is true in New York and LA really too, and even in Portland, these places with a reputation for being like super liberal, some stand-up shows, they'll even write you an email beforehand, and say like a showcase, even, you're doing 10 minutes, and they'll be like, we want to make sure that you don't say anything that would fetishize Black people. That was a specific one I remember someone saying. Make sure that you don't say anything critical of gender identity. Like there's like a whole list of rules. Like that was in Portland in particular, um, but every city, as much as some shows are like that, where whether it's you're told explicitly or it's just the audience, it's just the vibe of the thing, you can tell what's going on here. You have to be pretty careful. Um, there's always other shows in these cities where you go and people are doing just like, holy shit, I can't believe they just said that. Just Bill Hicks, Dave Chappelle, whatever you want to call it, like real stand up.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a bias, obviously, because some stand up where people are being silly and fun and it's apolitical, like that can be really great. And I love that. But the kind of stuff that I think, a lot of us are really, really into, where you're being unorthodox. I mean, that's the stuff we love from stand up, is when you're saying stuff that goes against what you're supposed to believe. And that is alive and well, I think, in every stand-up scene in the country, but it depends on the show. And in Austin, it's definitely a little bit more underground.
Yeah.
The ones where people are really saying some countercultural things. And again, this is counter the leftist culture that has taken over. Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry, like just even like outside the frame of comedy though, like if you're at a pub or a cafe or whatever, a saloon talking to,
we have saloons in Austin.
Your average person, like where are they kind of in that same frame as the
your average
scene?
person who's not like a business traveler coming through? I would say Austin is fairly blue liberal. There's definitely some purple in there and a sprinkle of red, but it definitely leans blue until you get right outside the city, where you got purple. Austin is definitely surrounded by purple, and then not far out of that purple, it's red. And so there's definitely a diversity of opinion, but it is heavily liberal. And I can say anything, but again, like, when I talk to people all over, I mean, people will quickly let their guard down, and we can have more real conversations. But people are more politically correct and liberal in Austin than I would like them to be.
Is there excitement over Joe Rogan's move there, or is it the opposite? Like they're worried that it's going to attract kind of that LA culture to Austin?
In the stand-up community, I would say all of the comics who are good and or have taste and or who really like stand-up comedy, I think most people are pretty excited. There are a few who are worried not so much about the LA culture, but about some kind of bro culture, or like some people don't like the Comedy Store and what they do there. But a lot of us are pretty excited. And something which, if 5 years ago you had told me I would give a shit about Joe Rogan in any way, shape, or form, or maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like, I just would have been like, what?
Yeah.
The fear factor. What is he, wrestle people or something? He's the bro guy. I just don't. But I came to really appreciate his podcast over the last couple of years, and finally, like, gave his stand up more of a try. And like, I wish he would stop yelling, but I enjoy this little man, and he loves comedy.
Yeah.
And I want a Comedy Store type situation in Austin. I mean, that would be amazing. I hope he completely starts something like that. And so a lot of people are really excited. And I would say the people who aren't, like, they don't, I mean, there's a lot of people who, especially if you're not in the stand-up world, but even if you are, just have never given him a chance and don't really get what he's like. And there's some people who are like, oh, what's going on? But the people who are paying attention, I think, are pretty excited.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Are you going to be totally mobile, you think, the next year, or are you going to head back that way?
I'm gonna be in Austin from like June through September. We have like a summer home situation set up for us in Austin. And so, and that's when I like to be in Austin, when it's nice and hot. And I want to be there when other people are running and cowering away. But I love it during the summers. And so I'm excited. I think by then, even more, because like I said, plenty is happening now. But by then, even more will be happening. And maybe, if Joe Rogan really is starting, I mean, it's weird for me to be leaving right now because there's part of me that's like, oh my God, this place that I've invested myself in so much is finally like, there might be some opportunities. But right now, it's still just kind of, scattered shows. And I don't think that, well, I mean, the Chappelle thing now being over, like that kind of um, changes the dynamic. But what I hope is that, um, yeah, I'm able to come in the summer and then do some really awesome shows and at some point meet Joe Rogan and be on his podcast, and then my career will finally take off. So, we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Well, for now, you have an American in Berlin podcast to
I'll
lean
take
on.
it.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say I love what's going on. I don't know like what room you're in, but you have three various stages of open toilet paper in the background.
Some van life stuff.
Every color highlighter, like a child participation trophy, and then an empty bottle of medication.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
They say to frame with interest, with objects of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my girlfriend's younger brother's old room and slash a child's playroom slash the place where we've like laid out all the stuff that was in our van so that we can renovate it, and then we'll put the stuff back. So the toilet papers just are pooping outside toilet paper for the
Yeah.
future.
Well, I definitely feel like we've solved all the world's problems on this episode.
And
So
if we
that's good.
haven't, people can go listen to Make America Get Along Again, search for MAGAA. We're gonna solve all the rest of the world's problems there over time.
Yeah. I was gonna ask where people can find you in the world and what to follow and all that stuff. Do you want to put your?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends on what you want from me. I do, follow me on Facebook at Arielle Isaac Norman. I am probably going to do more and more stuff there, honestly. And then Instagram and TikTok are at Ellen DeGenderless. And that's, I think I might start doing some TikTok stuff for van life. What I've realized recently is that I really do want to just talk into the camera to people, but I've been avoiding that because I really want to do it. Just like I avoided stand up for so long, it's just more vulnerable when you really do want to do something. And I just felt like such a douchey thing to do, to be like, "Hey guys, let me talk to you," and but the reality is, it's like that's what people are doing now.
Yeah.
And so why should I be embarrassed if all these 22-year-olds think that they have things to say into the camera? Then there's no reason I can't do that. And so I just want to kind of share with people what we're doing, what our van is like that my girlfriend has custom built. We've done it pretty inexpensively too. We're not buying a Sprinter for $60,000 or whatever they are. And going around, we've done things really on a budget, and it's like I want to show people like what they can do with their lives if they want to be healthier, happier, go on adventures. Like it really is doable. And yeah, and then just I just want to figure out a way to build an audience of me being really honest and open about things that I believe, and not just having to be very careful in the way that I write articles for Medium or do stand up. Like I really want a venue where I can be honest. And if I could really be honest with people, like I can be very funny. I have a lot of really funny dark things to say, but it's just no outlet, and it's just been building up with no outlet because yeah, there's a cancel culture dynamic that I don't want to run afoul of. But I think TikTok is maybe going to be the place where I start doing that, or YouTube. I mean, but the YouTube thing is like you need at least 1,000 followers to go live on YouTube or something. Do you know?
That is definitely not true. That's speaking to someone who typically would do this video thing that way. Yeah. Anybody can go
Oh
live.
no, sorry, you cut out. What'd you say?
Anybody can go live.
Can?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to go live from your phone, I think you need that. But if you have a laptop, you can go live no matter what. That was a hardcore cutout. That booted me.
It was
out
a
of
hard,
the
yeah.
system.
But it was pretty bad. So that's what I thought. Like, that's what I thought I had understood is that you can't go live from your phone without that, but you can on the computer. But then the other day when I was starting to try it, it seemed like you had to again. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have just been because I was having someone else call into, I don't know. But so if I can figure out how to do it on YouTube, then I am going to start being on YouTube more because I think just like with Facebook, that more of the audience that I want to reach is you. Yeah, and that's the thing. So you're helping me. Thanks for being my therapist. I'm going to be focusing on YouTube and Facebook for my political comedic content. And then, if you like to see a tiny dog and like some van life stuff like that, then Instagram at Ellen DeGenderless. It's very wholesome, cute stuff. What I do there. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Arielle, I think that not only do you have like unique views, but like very well thought out and important ones and perspectives. So yeah, thank you so much for talking.
Well, thanks for having me. I just am trying to represent underrepresented views. And even if they're wrong, they still need to be represented so that we can talk about it. And that's how I feel. Like, I don't mind if I'm wrong. I'm happy for people to give me their dissenting opinions, but that's what I feel like I'm doing is giving the dissenting opinion for a lot of what's going on in whatever culture that I happen to be in. So yeah, thanks for valuing
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Also, I forgot so that I don't have to do too much editing. Yeah, follow me at Eric Berry Writes on Instagram, and I kind of swore off those other mediums for all the hate pit that they are. So anyway,
Good idea.
again, thank you so much for chatting. Otherwise, for all the listeners, we'll chat with you next week from where I have no fucking clue where in the world I'm going to be next week. So, yeah. All right.
Fun.